My opinion on this movie may upset some people. One Piece, episode of Chopper, the Miracle Winter Cherry Blossom, Jesus, is the 9th One Piece movie in the series, and like the previous movie, it focuses on a retelling of prior events. However, the hook with this movie is that it completely remixes things so it makes no sense in the canon, adds in new characters, and changes core aspects of the story, and I thought it was so good. Please hear me out. Released on March 1st, 2008, the last anime episode that aired before this was Absalom waking up the General Zombies, whereas in the manga, Brook had just officially joined the crew. I did not enjoy the retelling of Alabasta in the previous movie, and I figured I'd have the same experience with the retelling of Drum Island, but actually, this movie took the vast majority of my criticisms and addressed them head on. Not only do I believe this is a damn good movie, but at times, I even think it improves on the original source material. Let me break down my sacrilegious point of view. Firstly, this movie is the longest one yet, by far, even though it doesn't feel it. It comes in at 1 hour and 50 minutes, which already means it doesn't have to rush through its story and can take the time to let dramatic moments breathe, but also insert fun small moments. Secondly, the movie manages to get the viewer up to speed on what the One Piece world is through opening narration. I actually think it's very new viewer friendly. Every character even gets a brief moment of introduction and says out loud what they do for the crew. It's not profound storytelling, but it's effective. I also like how at the very beginning of the movie, we see a montage of both original characters from previous movies as well as from the manga canon, even though this film openly contradicts both continuities. So, I should address that now. The crew for this movie consists of Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, Nami, Robin, and Franky. It's Franky and the Thousand Sunny's first movie appearance. Notably, Chopper is not a member of the Straw Hat Pirates. In my previous videos, I play a little game where I try to fit the events of these movies into the canon, but this one is just straight up set in some alternate reality. Here, I presume the entire story happened through the Water 7 saga, just without Chopper, and also, the entire geography of the Grand Line is altered so that Drum Island is much closer to the Sabaody Archipelago than Reverse Mountain. I don't know, it's weird, and it's notable that not one time does anyone on the crew mention a specific location they've been to, that they're heading to, or reference any kind of past events. Honestly, for all we know, they all could have just been childhood friends from the start. Nothing is really addressed, and nothing really matters at all, so throw continuity out of your mind. As weird as this all was, it did make me excited for what they do with this bizarre setup. Frankly, I think they really made it work, and I'm pretty impressed with how well this movie keeps to the original events, while at the same time completely altering other aspects of the story, but bringing everything together by the end. From the jump, the story sticks with Nami getting sick as a reason to immediately find a doctor, which brings them to Drum Island. In the original, Vivi and Karu are with the crew, but their roles are largely remixed with Robin and Franky instead. Robin sticks by Usopp's side for the Dalton plotline, whereas Franky stays on the Sunny with Zoro. Zoro and Franky's plotline quickly spirals into the first original thread, but I'll get to that in a second. Some of the other slight remixes are that the crew sees Chopper right away, but he goes running for the hills, and also, Dalton kind of gets the shaft. He's still Dalton, but for some reason he never once uses his Devil Fruit ability, so maybe in this weird reality, for some reason, he never ate that fruit. It was just a bizarre change that I felt should be addressed. But everything else is extremely faithful to the original source material. Well, everything except Wapol and his older brother. I take it all back. What a horrible reality this is. While Luffy and Sanji are carrying Nami to the castle, Drum Island is invaded by Wapol's forces, and that's where Zoro and Franky come in. In this version of events, Wapol has an armada of ships that these two absolutely obliterate in a fun sequence of action craziness. I also feel that despite this being wholly original, the story gave the characters organic reactions to things that they had never seen in the series, such as Franky being amazed at Wapol's submerging ship. Wapol and his brother Mushiru land on the island with a small number of their forces, looking to reestablish their rule. But first, I'd like to talk about the animation. The animation between these movies is always so interesting to me. The last movie looked really nice, and I'd say this movie definitely looks better than the previous anime adaptation. At times, I'd say it looks as good as the previous movie, but other times, I think it looks as bad as movie 6. Once again, I think my problem stems from the character models. Just look at some of these shots. The backgrounds can look great, but the characters just look off with a slightly janky style that I don't really like. Even during the action sequence with Frankie and Zorro, for one scene, Zorro's swords just look like white sticks, and then in another scene, they look like regular swords. There's an overall inconsistency in quality that doesn't ruin the movie, but it is noticeable. Speaking of noticeable, the entire avalanche sequence looks like an early 2000s video game cutscene. It does its best to hide the CGI, like never having any close-ups on the characters' faces, but it's obvious to anyone with eyes. Again, this isn't movie destroying, but I do find it interesting to see how this tried something new rather than updating its old animation. So I give it props for that. Back to Walpole. I actually think this movie really improved him. His brother looks like the most filler character of all time, but I actually think he was key to enhancing the Walpole side of the Drum Island storyline, which I always thought was the weakest part. This movie makes it clear from Walpole's introduction that he hates his citizens, wants to terrorize them so they obey him, and is more of an immediate threat than some kind of background authoritarian. He left Drum Island in the first place to go get his brother, which explains what exactly he was doing, and he wants to use his brother's idiocy and cruelty to terrorize the people more. The plan is to use Mushiru's poison mushroom bomb attack on the people, but also to plant word of an antidote in order to draw out those who are disloyal among his people. All that makes Walpole far more cunning, outright villainous, and threatening than the dumb sack of dog shit he was originally. He's still not my favorite villain or anything, but this is a clear improvement, and I really respect how this was done in such a succinct way. The middle chunk of the movie is a consistent retelling of events from the arrival at the castle through the start of the final battle. I think the flashback in particular was handled much better here than in the anime. It doesn't miss a beat, and it's all told in one go, which makes for a smoother experience. Then, the final fight is remixed in an interesting way. Chess and Kuramarumo are barely involved at all. They do one thing and then are knocked out and forgotten. Instead, Mushiru, with his Shroom powers, is the main opponent for Luffy to take on. This was such a smart decision. He goes up against Luffy and actually puts up a fight with some pretty good, fun, animated action. Luffy even busts out second gear to keep things fast-paced. The fight comes to an end after Walpole eats his brother and a cannon to transform into a mega threat that is then stopped by Chopper, and the day is saved. Things then wrap up much in the same way as the original, with the final scene being the cherry blossoms blooming. As you can tell by now, I was very impressed with this movie, although I do think there were a few cons that come with this weird remix. The most glaring of these is Nami's reasoning for wanting to hurry from Kureha's care. In the original, this is because they are in a rush to get to Alabasta for Vivi. In this movie, Nami just doesn't want the log post to reset because they were heading to some unnamed destination before coming here. It's a bit weak since it's all so vague, but I do think this is the best they could have done given the context of this story. Also, Chopper busts out his rumble ball in the last fight, and that was never set up and is never explained. But honestly, I think that's the only plot issue someone who has never seen One Piece would have while watching, and it's so quick to be ignorable. So yeah, surprisingly, I think this movie was great. It took all the strengths of the original story and made them even stronger. I actually may prefer this to the original, despite it not making any sense. Streamlined, smooth, fun, and emotional. I think the movie team killed it with this one. I have no idea how. It feels like lightning in a bottle, like they couldn't repeat this formula again for each Straw Hat. Oh, the whole crew, including Brook, is going to Syrup Village to recruit Usopp. No, that wouldn't work. This movie shouldn't have worked, and yet, somehow they managed to pull it off. I think it stays true to the original, is well-paced and cohesive, but has enough new for existing fans to get something fresh out of the experience. On the scale of completely bonkers canon, late 2000s anime movies, Episode of Chopper is a solid 8.5 out of 10. Honestly, it's close to being the first One Piece movie I'd recommend to people to get a feel for the series, but the out-of-canon hijinks does kind of ruin that. What did you think about this one? Did the inclusion of Robin, Frankie, and the Sunny piss you off? What about Wapol and his weird older brother? Also, did the CGI in this movie remind anyone else of this Rugrats game for the PS2? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and special thank you to my patrons who make all this madness possible. My review for the next movie, Strong World, will be out next week, and I've heard some good things. But until the next time, I'll shut up.